All right, technical session number 42. Yesterday, we talked about security, getting kind of introduced to the ecosystem and had a pretty definitional approach as to what all these various things were and how to kind of identify them, what the kind of nuanced differences are between like viruses and malware, worms, Trojans, denial of service, botnets. We started diving into a lot of these things. Today, we're going to look towards some prevention methods. And our objectives are to be able to identify a variety of security prevention methods, compare and contrast common prevention methods to aid in physical and digital security. Remember, we keep talking about one of the most overlooked things with IT is the actual physical security of your hardware. Today, we will be kind of approaching various ways you can use and things you can use to help protect your equipment. We're going to be talking about several ways clients can prevent security threats on their own, and as well as explain the principle of least privilege. This is one that comes up a lot, principle of least privilege. Behavior skills and mindsets we want to keep in mind for this particular technical session be teamwork. Excuse me. As we all know, IT is a team sport. Skills may vary. So you need to lean on your team's strengths and help them with their weaknesses. Also maintain a future orientation, understanding the things we do today will inevitably help us or affect the way things work in the future. If we do not put a disaster recovery plan in place today, when that disaster does arrive, we won't have a clear path to resolving it. Or if we do, like we talked about yesterday, have a great, wonderful, detailed disaster recovery plan that has thought out every possible, eventuality that could come out of this. We've done live fire exercises. We did everything we could, but then we forgot to get ourselves a paper copy of that particular one and we lose our systems. Didn't quite plan for the future effectively enough. We had a beautiful plan, we just had no way to access it when we actually needed it. So I want to try to keep these things in mind as we work through it. Now, most of the threats that you will face on a regular basis as an IT professional there are methods that we can put and things we can do on a regular basis to try to prevent these things from happening. So these potential threats are always going to exist. People are going to try to access your systems. Viruses, malware, spoofing, phishing, all of this stuff is a threat to any organization. So here are some of the methods and generalized areas where we can try to mitigate this as much as possible. First one being physical security. As we've talked about before, if somebody has physical access to your systems, they own your systems. There's a lot that can be done damage-wise if they have physical access. So we need to prevent that as much as possible and not just theft. Digital security. This predominantly focuses on trying to keep harmful data and malware out. Various things we can use. We talked about a few of these before with our intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems, firewalls, anti-malware, unified threat managements, and the like. As with almost anything, your biggest vulnerability is the actual user themselves. How do we mitigate this? With end user education, trying to make sure that employees are well educated on potential threats, like how to spot phishing emails, how to identify, whether or not they're coming from a credible source, little things you can do. Also, not going to certain types of sites. Like you don't want them going to, a like Bobby Movie, if anybody remembers what that was. where you can go and download all the movies, sometimes even before they hit the theater. So you don't want them accessing sites like that. So you would have something like an acceptable use policy in place. You don't necessarily want them going on gambling sites and a lot of other, sites as well. And these can all be documented in your acceptable use policy, although you're going to have to continually do some form of education. You have your on hires when they are first starting with the company. They usually go through some form of onboarding, orientation, where this education would initially take place. And then you could do some regular education after that. Sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes it's yearly, depending on the organization you're with. And then finally, we talk about the principle of least privilege. As we said, this one will come up quite a bit. And this holds to a theory that you only give people the bare minimum access that they need to do their job and no more. If there's a special function that they may need to perform once or twice a year, they don't need to have access to be able to perform that function all year round. You can use special administrative privileges at that point to allow them access at that time to perform that task, and then turn it off. And the principle of least privilege can be enforced through group policies. All right, some examples of physical security to keep in mind. Doors with locks on them. Seems like a real common sense one, but I can't tell you, the majority of the offices I've worked at, the server rooms were just wide open. Why? Like, it's hot in there. So got to keep the servers cool, right? Well, then the ventilation needs to be upgraded and the doors need to be locked, because if you have physical access, there's a lot you can do. We would have guests walking in and out right by our server rooms constantly, wide open. And we even had one place where they used it also as a storeroom. Like, they would store all other form of electronics, equipment and stuff. And you had people going in and out of there all day, getting mice, keyboards, monitors, phones, cables. All that stuff was just stored in there with the server, because, computer, it all goes together, right? So quite literally, the entire office had full access, and you had, I guess, 10 to 20% of the office going in there at any given point throughout the day, just because it's various things needed, people being onboarded, people leaving, equipment breaking, all that kind of stuff. Man traps.
I'd like to add, my best friend, he now works for Clemson's cybersecurity, but when he was in college, he was an intern there, and his boss would have him and the other interns go to like different places that they help service for security. They would just go in pretending to be someone they weren't, to see if they could get into their systems. And most of the time, people would just let them walk in, or wouldn't even ask them what they were doing.
Yep.
So a very simple fix is a locked door.
Yeah.
At the very least.
And that's part of what we were talking about, yesterday. Is a lot of times people in general, people want to be nice. They want to be relatively helpful, so long as it isn't too far out of their way. It's like, hey, can you help me carry these boxes, 4 blocks to my house? I got somewhere to be, but if it's, hey, I'm carrying these heavy boxes, can you hold the door? Sure. So there is a streak in us that want to be nice, that want to be helpful to a point. And bad actors will play upon that in order to gain access. Yep. Like Avery's friend.
Yep.
So man traps are a way to kind of prevent things like tailgating. We'll get into what a man trap is here in a little bit, but that is a nice preventable method. Cable locks. We mentioned this a little bit earlier when we were talking about laptop security in our first week, going way back to that point. Securing physical documents, file cabinets, locking file cabinets, utilizing password security, and shredding documentation, which will build upon the business model that Marvin and I have been working on for at least 3 cohorts. And Avery is looking to be a junior partner in. And then we got ID badges to let everybody know if you are somewhere you're supposed to be. If you have varying levels of security in your building, you may have different color badges so that they can be identified at a distance, whether or not they should be in the area that they're in. Key fobs. Great way to, it plays upon the locked doors because they do have key fobs with those magnetic doors that you can use to unlock the doors. I've worked at places where we've used these. And then we also get into biometrics for physical security, RFID badges, which are pretty similar to the key fobs, but those are NFCs typically. Smart cards, like if anybody's ever, do we have any ex-military in this group?
I'm in the National Guard.
Okay, so you have your, the card you get on the base, the card with the chip on it, the gold chip. Is it called a CAT card?
Yeah, CAT card.
Yeah. So that would be an ID or a example of a smart card. Drivers also use them for the port. So going in and out of the ports, they would have a TWIC card that has a similar chip, looks almost identical to the CAT card. Tokens, very powerful security tool. And you have software versus hardware tokens. Entry control rosters, basically a list. Are you not eligible to enter into this area? Guards will typically have a list of people to see, who is available, and you would have to pre-approve guests, things like that. And then privacy filters, as we talked about yesterday, to prevent things like shoulder surfing. So we'll kind of get into these here a little bit. So first, lock doors. Seems simple, but what does it always say about locked doors, Marvin or Avery?
Keeps honest people honest.
Keeps honest people honest. It's all it does.
Good try, Alan.
Good try. So locked doors keeps people out for the most part, because if you're fiddling around with a locked door, it's generally going to draw attention to you. But if it is a skilled thief, they'll get through it anyway. So for the most part, it keeps honest people honest. And the point is, in any level of security, we're creating layers. There is no one solution fits all. I'm done. I've put this one thing in place. I never have to think about security ever again. That doesn't work. You have to have a layered approach to security. So a locked door, and it could be with a key, it could be with a passcode, it could be with biometrics, it could be with a key fob. Various ways that you can have to access it, but very least have those doors locked so that the average employee or guest can't just wander into that area. All right. So ideally, you should have at least a minimum of 3 physical barriers between the outside and the internal. So your most external perimeter essentially is called the perimeter. You would have like a fence or something like that around it, or it could be like the locked doors to your office building or something along those lines, where they would have to pass through the first layer of security. Next, you would have an entrance to the office if it's, if your building is the exterior, because if you're in a building that has multiple companies operating in it, so they may have access to get into the building. And then you have a next level access that would require an ID badge or something like that to get into your actual office area. So you would typically use something like ID badges to gain access to that. A lot of times they're combining the ID badge with the smart card or an RFID card in one, just to make it real easy. So you only have to maintain one item. And then lastly, you would have the entrance to the computer room itself. And this could require key fobs, this could require smart cards, or some other form of access to get into it. And hopefully you would have this set up with some form of security monitoring or alarm systems as well. Ours, even though they left the rooms open, they were monitored by cameras at all times, as well as thermal, like temperature monitors and humidity monitors. So they had some level of security, but that's not going to prevent anything. It's mostly just going to help you clean up afterwards, kind of thing. All right, questions so far? All right. All right. Next, the man trap. It is essentially just a small room, as you can see it right here, with two doors. Typically, it's too small for multiple people to stand within it. And both doors should not be able to open at the same time. So the person opens one door, steps into the room, closes it, and then the next door opens. And you would have either a camera or some other form of security in here to be able to monitor it, to make sure not more than one person is entering into the man trap at the same time. So this is used to prevent tailgating. Like somebody just sneaking in behind you. So sometimes you would have a guard in between here or a window where where security would be monitoring, or a camera that once you have cleared into the first room, they will buzz access into the second one. It's actually a bar I used to go to in PA that had a man trap to get into the building. I always found that kind of weird.
That's how you keep minors out.
Well, and it was security monitored too. I mean, it was a private club, I guess you could say. I mean, and I know that sounds like that's like real, ooh, it was a private club. No, this was like a local pub, but they had a man trap to get into it.
You heard Kelly. He only went to the finest establishment.
Yes, that's what it was. So that is a man trap. All right, next, cable locks. We talked about this one quite a bit. It is a physical cable used to secure typically laptops, although you can utilize them on towers and stuff as well as they will lock the actual physical cases on towers, because if you can gain access into the tower, if I can open up that case, what can I do to gain access? What is one thing I can do to gain access to a system if I can open the case? Something simple. I'm not destroying anything, but it's something I can do that will allow me greater access to a system. Got to think like a hacker. It'll allow me to change a whole bunch of settings, reset some security passwords. Once I do that, then I can say upload my own operating systems and stuff and get greater access. Did we all go to sleep?
We have some answers in chat.
Oh, it'd probably help if I open the
Not-
chat.
Not the one you're looking for.
Not the one I'm looking for.
No, but some decent ideas.
Decent ideas. What do we got here? Add a device. Yeah. Now, if I add a device I could control, Mark, how would the system be able to recognize that device?
Have to tap it with the BIOS.
Okay, how would I do that?
Maybe
Maybe we tried
with
turning
a-
it on, but they had a BIOS password. What do I do?
Pull the battery out.
There you go.
Nice.
Pull the CMOS battery, remove the jumper. That resets the BIOS. If I reset the BIOS, I can go in and change the boot order. If I change the boot order, that means I can have it boot from a USB and upload any nefarious software I want that will get me access to that system. So in order to prevent something like that happening, because it's an easy workaround, you lock the case. So if you've added the device, you need to be able to communicate with the BIOS to be able to talk to that device. Hard drives, stealing hard drives. What particular item on the motherboard would make it so I couldn't read the hard drives if I stole them? So why would stealing the hard drives be a bad idea?
Stealing is illegal.
Other than that, so they've encrypted the hard drives. How could I mean, I know they're using Windows BitLocker, so why wouldn't I be able to decrypt it? What piece is missing for me to be able to decrypt that hard drive? There is a physical piece that we put, well, there's an encryption key, yeah, but where is that key kept? There's a physical piece of firmware we'll get you guys thinking like hackers yet.
The TPM chip.
Yes. TPM, what does that stand for?
Trusted Module Protection.
Trusted
Close.
platform module.
There you go. Trusted platform module. That piece right there holds the key to decrypting the drive. So if you just go in and steal the drives, they're useless to you. I mean, granted, the person you stole them from no longer has them, but they're no use to you either, because you need the TPM that is welded on the motherboard or soldered on the motherboard in order to be able to decrypt those drives. So I like where you're heading with that, but from a security perspective, that one, that is a preventative measure under that. So, but again, cable locks, physical way to lock down laptops. Is it a surefire, nobody's ever going to get through this? No. If someone is bound and determined to steal that laptop, they got one of two options. They can try to cut that cable, which bolt cutters aren't really conspicuous. So, you're probably going to notice that in an office, somebody trying to use bolt cutters. The other option is actually breaking the casing on the laptop to get the cable out. And again, also not conspicuous. But for the most part, it just makes it inconvenient to steal the laptop. So generally speaking, they will bypass that for an easier target. All right. Next, securing physical documents, passwords, and shredding. So most companies are trying to go paperless. Unfortunately, many still create a huge amount of paperwork. Also, they may have to do this for like legal cases and stuff like that. They have to maintain records for X amount of years, and they have to have hard copies, as not just digital copies. So there's compliance issues that you have to take care of as well. So in these cases, but even with that, we have to protect these things. So they have to have locking file cabinets, and they have some really nice fancy file cabinets with digital locks or biometrics and stuff like that you can lock away all these files in. And also, when you're getting rid of these files, you have to take into account what is somebody, could somebody utilize this? Is there any sensitive information like personally identifiable information of employees or customers, health information, things like that? You can't just take this paper and just throw it into a recycle bin and send it off to the recycler, because bad actors do things called dumpster diving, where they will literally go in and search through your dumpsters for any kind of proprietary information or any information they can use to steal identities, gain access to your physical systems, possibly notes on your recent stock meetings. If something really bad is going to happen with the company, they can short the stock, make a ton of money. So there's a lot of different types of people that want to steal this kind of information. So you don't just want to just throw paper into the recycle bin if there's anything sensitive on it and then just put it out to be recycled. So you need to do things like shredding. So, and you need high quality shredders because there are patient people out there that might want to try to put this stuff together. The office I worked at, they were so paranoid that it didn't just shred the paper, it powderized it. I mean, it turned it into a fine powder. And then when the recycling company would come to pick it up, they would pour a liquid over it and turn it into a mash so that it was completely unrecoverable no matter what you did. So, I mean, shredders can go from just like the little straight cuts. Some do like pretty fine cross cuts all the way down to like I was just talking about where it goes into like literally into a powder, and then they turn it into a mash to prevent it from even being recoverable at all. It's just a goo at that point. Some places go to the extent of actually incinerating that paper to make sure that no matter what, there's nothing that can be done. So there's different ways that you can use to prevent your personal documents from falling into the wrong hands. Next, ID badges. Could be any form that identifies a person. Typically, they'll have like their name, rank in the company, what company they work for, level of access, things like that. And it should be able to differentiate the holder from everyone else. Like you want to know who is a standard employee versus a guest. Guest level access would probably be to main open areas, and then they would have to have an escort into an individual office and then escort back out of the area. So, but ID badges can be used to identify this. This is a big thing in schools right now. If you go to a school, you need to sign in. They give you a guest ID badge, and many times you will need an escort to go to whatever classroom you go to and then escort back out. This is obviously pre-COVID. Now, at this current point, very rare anybody can come into the school building as it is. But this is one of the security methods that they have in place. All right, key fobs. Small little chips that you can put on your key ring, kind of nice. They use embedded radio frequency circuits that will allow you physical access to a system. Typically, they use like magnetic doors. You hold up the key fob to the panel, pops the door open, you can walk in, and then it logs your use of that key fob and when you've entered those doors. Typically, it's given to you as soon as you sign on with the company. Here's your way to get into the building. Here's your ID badge, your key, all that kind of fun stuff. And it's just another way to log who's come and gone at what time, and another security method you can put in place. Questions so far? No questions, Alan? Sure about that? You look like you had a question.
Don't be shy, Alan.
I don't think I'm shy, guys.
Do you remember to hit enter? All right, moving along. Only 4 more times.
Kelly they call Kelly the shredder. Just tears you down.
I'm a builder upper, I promise. All right. I only say that, Alan, because I've done way worse. All right. Other examples of physical security, biometrics. There are some that are pretty unintrusive, all the way up to extremely intrusive ways to get into a building. Some of the least intrusive you might come across are the, the thumbprints. We use those on our phones. Facial recognition. Those used to be pretty bad, but they've gotten a lot better. It used to be you could literally hold up a picture of the person and it wouldn't recognize the difference between the person, a picture, or the physical person themselves. So picture was good enough. You could bypass facial recognition at that point. Now they actually wait for movement. So they want to make sure they're looking at a 3D image. So they're getting much better, but they still have a long way to go. Retinal scanners. There are actually two different types of retinal scanners. There's one that actually just takes a picture of the iris itself, because that is actually a unique fingerprint, your iris, or the colored part of your eye around the pupil. And then there's the kind that actually scan the veins in the back of the eye, which is a much more detailed fingerprint, but it is a bit more intrusive. And possibly soon, DNA. Has anybody here ever seen the movie Gattaca? Ethan Hawke. If you have not watched the movie, I do highly recommend it. It's kind of, into the future where they basically are genetically engineering people, and people who choose not to do it, how they get around these systems and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting. And everywhere you go, it's DNA recognition. You put your thumb on something, a needle pierces your skin, takes a drop of blood, and it identifies who you are. So they had to find ways to get around this. And they called them, like, I think, what is it called? The broken ladders, or stolen ladder. Somebody who stole the identity of somebody who was modified in order to gain more prestige in society. So good movie, worth a watch. All right. So biometrics are being employed more and more and more. I think many people realize, like the Apple phone, like they've gotten rid of the home button, because they want you to essentially either do the fingerprint scan or facial recognition. So, any questions with regards to biometrics? All right.
Mr. Kelly, I have a question.
Yes.
Biometrics now, it's like, if you know, it's used by China, yeah, mostly now, like
Facial recognition, they have employed it on a scale that is unheard of in history. Yes.
Okay.
So like they are, I think they have, like, it's 80% of the population of China, 80%. So you're talking over 1 billion people in the facial recognition system. And in some of their cities, you're getting pinged a couple dozen times per block. So the level of security that is, or surveillance and stuff that is going on there right now is just unprecedented in history. So yes, you are correct. All right. Although it's not the most cameras per square mile. Does anybody know what country has the most cameras per square mile? No, it's not us, actually.
Great Britain, maybe?
There you go.
Yeah,
Ajan's got
okay.
it. It's Great Britain. Yes. Most cameras per square mile that are active, like security cameras and all that stuff. The most surveilled country in the world at this point. All right.
You know why?
Well, I'm Irish, so I've got issues with the Brits anyway. I'm kidding. So
They got to keep the queen safe, Kelly.
Oh, okay. What was your answer, Alan?
I don't know. I would like to know why they're.
Well, I mean, a lot of it does come down to security, and it actually does have to do with the Irish because of the Sinn Féin and the IRA back in the 80s and 90s. There was the terroristic bombings and all that stuff that were going on in London. And so more and more they started relying on CCTV security and surveillance and all that stuff. So it kind of built up, and then 9/11, it magnified even more. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, we flew over to London to play a football game when I was in college, and it was crazy getting off the airplane at Heathrow, and you've got police officers walking around with M16s, and they've got grenades on their belts.
Oh yeah,
I mean, all over the place. It was crazy.
Yeah.
How else are you going to stop a football team from trying to take the queen?
I forget where it was. My dad was going through, and one of his employees was saying, it's like, man, I thought they would have a lot more security in this airport than they actually do. My dad goes, look up. And up above the actual airport, they black out the roof, And at a certain point, your eye doesn't really go up above that, but above that, they have catwalks, and they had guys with machine guns walking up and down the catwalk. So they always had the high ground and all that stuff. So they take security very seriously. So, all right. But yeah, it's been a long time since I've been through Heathrow. All right. So you have something to say, Mike? Or Mark?
Again, I couldn't hear you.
No, I didn't know if you had something, you were trying to add something. It looked like you wanted to say something.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. That was just shocking to me, and I knew, you know, that the bombings were still going on over there, but it was just surprising to see all of that over there like that.
You know what ended it?
I don't remember.
9/11.
Oh yeah, distraction, something else going on.
No,
bigger than
Sinn
world.
Féin did not want to be associated in the same
Oh,
grouping as the terror of that whole thing. They didn't want to be associated with being that. So they literally just stopped.
Okay.
It was weird. It happened. Because you go back like a year before and there were still incidents happening. All right. RFID badges, radio frequency identification. Wonderful wireless non-contact technology used with ID badges. You can use it also for inventory. Like they have them where you can put them in, they use them for security in stores, like bookstores and stuff will use them. They'll have like a little sticker just with like wires. It looks like a chip or whatever. Or if you've ever, bought a book from Barnes and Noble, every now and again, like you see a little chip fall out, little square piece of paper with looks like circuitry on it. That's the RFID tag for that book, so that if it tries to walk out without being paid for, sets off the alarms. It increases the security and authentication process because you must be in physical possession of this card in order for it to access. And the neat thing is it doesn't necessarily require a power source. The power source comes from the actual reader itself. It puts off an electrical signal that essentially, when it gets close to the badge is then essentially powered up, and then it can read that signal coming from the RFID badge itself. The only problem is if the card is lost or stolen, that person then gains access to whoever the previous person had access, unless it is discovered quickly enough to where it can be shut down. Smart cards. We were talking about this is like the CAT cards or TWIC cards. It looks like a credit card with a little chip. The chip looks exactly like the new chips on credit cards, but prior to us employing them in that particular way, it was used for identification and security on military bases and ports, because ports need a high level of security as well, to gain access. And it has a whole bunch of information on it to prove that you are who you say you are, to gain you access to it. Have a nice little card reader for that. There are laptops and desktops that actually have these smart card readers built into them, and if you want to get authorization to it, you have to have the smart card and a password. It's called multi-factor authentication. And I think we will get into that. Have we talked about that yet? The 4 aspects of multi-factor authentication? A little bit. Does everybody remember what it is? Anybody? 4 things. I'll give you the first one, which is a smart card, which is something you have.
Something you know.
Something you know.
Something you are.
Something you are.
And something you do.
That's a possibility, but I believe in A+, it's somewhere you are.
Oh, somewhere. Yeah, it is somewhere. GPS.
The 5th one, when you get into Network Plus, is something you do. So it's like, when you write your name, it's how you write your name, or when you type in your password, it actually pays attention to how you type, because you have micro hesitations in between your letters and stuff like that. So if you usually use 2 hands to type in your password, and then one time you do it one-handed, even though you type in your password perfectly, it may deny you access because your rhythm has changed. And so it may, they will assume that it's somebody else typing, not just you. So very good, Mark. All right. Next, tokens. So we have tokens here. There are physical and software tokens. And it's something you must have with you to be able to access network resources. What you're seeing right here would be something that has a password that would change every day, every hour, every minute, or every 30 seconds, depending on how it's set. So it would generate this random, or it's not really random, there's an algorithm to it, but it will generate a code every, like say for instance, like on this one, every 30 seconds. So when you're asked to log into a system, it will say, what is your passcode on your token? You would take your token, you would look at it, it would give you this 449054, you type it in, and it would grant you access. But the next time you go to type in, it may be 632854. So it'll be something completely different. It is a continually changing password based upon this token that you're carrying with you. Now, they also have software tokens, which you can download onto your phone, and it does similar things. So it will give you that randomly generated number. You can say, generate token, and it will give you that code for that moment, and then you can log into your system. So there's software versions versus hardware versions. Hardware versions can go from relatively inexpensive, probably about $100, $150, up to tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the level of security you're wanting.
I personally just like using the ones on my phone. They're a little cheaper
They're a couple bucks, yeah.
and sometimes
Janina.
even free.
Sometimes even free. I would never, I don't know about trusting free security devices though. That's just me.
Well, let's see if I can find them.
Go ahead, Janina, while he's looking for it.
So, with the chip, the different passwords will be sent to that chip or online. How does that work?
Well, in this particular case, what you're seeing here, it would be sent to this chip. So you keep this on your key ring, and then it would be sent to this. And you could also, with the USB, you could actually dock it in, like plug it in, and it would have direct read of it. But if you didn't have that access, like if it was for a bank account, you would have to, look at it and then type in the code manually.
So
Is there an
Google actually has.
Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead, Mark. You ask your question.
Is there an authenticator that tracks these passwords, or is it just trusted to the device or to the software?
Well,
person.
there is an authentication process, because you would have essentially it's the company that's providing the token, and then the token itself, and it would have to be authenticated back to the token provider, because you're saying like, I use RSA security ID. And so it will say, and it's all time-based. So like the computer system will receive this token and say, okay, at this time I'm receiving this token. Is this still valid? And they say, yes, it's valid. Like, but if the token number you give it is like a day or two old because somebody just glanced at your keychain, then they would say, no, that is not valid at this time. That is an expired code.
Yeah. And so the one that I use is the Google Authenticator. So it's native to my device because I have a Google phone, so I trust it. And I have multiple websites, apps, and even games where you can set it to do multi-authentication. So I have to do a password, then it will ask me for my Google Authenticator, and I don't know how well you can see it, but there's like the little dots right here, those are timers. And so I think it's 30 to 45 seconds, every single one of my my passes will change, my keys will change.
Mhm.
So it's constantly changing. So it has to be synced up really well with the account that I'm using.
And whatever account you're using has to be capable of authenticating with that particular type of token.
Yep.
Usually they'll give you a list or something like that. So did you have another question, Janina, or?
I do. For the applications one, is it like sent to like your email or something like that?
No, it's an app.
Okay. Okay. I was only asking because I'm like, well, if it goes to email, you know, people's emails get hacked all the time. That's what I was asking.
Well, but here's the thing: is it's time based. So if they send you a token, you know, here's where some of the problem comes in. Like, say if you know, like we're sending a code to your email. Well, sometimes it takes you 5-10 minutes to get email, depending on your level of internet or whatever that you have at that time. And so the token could be expired by the time you receive it via email. So within the application, it's an instantaneous transaction. You have it right there. You can move on. But even if they set the token to your email and somebody hacks your email, it would only be useful to them if they hacked your email right that second and got that code. And then they would have to be in the application that you're in, you know, to be able to cycle that code at that time.
And sometimes when you're setting up multi-factor authentication, it'll ask you, you know, should we send this to your phone? Should we send this to your email? And I personally like to have it sent to my phone because it's very unlikely that someone is going to have access to an account that I'm only using, like I only get onto from my computer and have my phone, you know, it keeps it separate. If I have it sent to my email, then, you know, if they're at my computer, they could probably easily get into my email if they're already able to get into everything else.
Yeah.
So I like to try to separate it as much as I can. So that way only I could possibly have both things at once to try to make it as secure as I can.
Again, layers of security, not, there
Yep.
is no magic bullet. You're just trying to make it as inconvenient as you can for somebody else to get your stuff.
Yeah. That's why when you'll see spam emails, there's a lot of grammatical errors because they don't want intelligent people to fall for it because they're more likely to, you know, not get away with it. They, you know, you'll notice it sooner. And so if they can, that's why the punctuation's crazy. There's random capital letters. They try to make it clear for someone that, you know,
Well, what if
is
you're
paying
somebody like me
attention.
that's like horrible at that stuff anyway?
Well, guess you know who to test.
Like, didn't you notice the 20 grammatical errors in there? No, I didn't.
Thought they was just typing fast.
Yeah, they want easy targets
That is true. That is true.
and gullible targets.
Have we shown the James Beach video in this class yet?
I don't think so.
I think we can probably show it today after we get through with this one.
Which one you want me to queue up?
Not the duck one, but like the one.
The toaster one.
Yeah. Yes.
I got
Yes.
you.
So, all right. So entry control roster. You basically want a list of people who have access, but also when each person entered and left the facility so that when, you know, if an event occurs, you can narrow down the list of people who were in the building at that time. Mostly this is automated at this point. So you do have entry and exit logs, you know, when people, you know, scan their smart cards or whatever to get in and out of the building, and then it's logged into the system. Says, you know, Avery entered it, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning. He checked out at 5 o'clock at night. All right. Questions so far? Thank you for that, Avery. Privacy filters. Talked about this yesterday when we were talking about shoulder surfing. It's just like a nice thin film that goes over, and they have them for phones, or you can put them on your phone. They have them for computers. It works quite nice to where you have to be directly in front of something in order to be able to get a clear view of it. If you move off the side, it blanks out the screen, you no longer have access. Now, older monitors, there is a type of older monitor that has this exact same feature. Does anybody know which type of monitor it is? It was considered to be a negative for the monitor, but it actually works out as a security feature inadvertently.
I still consider it negative.
That's terrible. It is if you're trying to, like if you have multiple people trying to watch a football game, it is a negative. I would agree.
Exactly.
Was it LCD TVs?
LCDs, what kind? Remember, there was a couple kinds of LCDs, weren't there?
Crap.
What were the two
Panasonic?
kind? Yeah, what were the two kind of LCDs that we talked about specifically?
Oh.
What was the kind that gamers liked?
Was it twisted pneumatic?
Yes, that's the kind that gamers like. What's the other
Nice.
kind?
Golly. Does it start with a P?
It has a P in it. Second word starts with a P.
IPS?
Yes, Fidel. Come off mute and tell us what that means.
IPS is in plane switching, right?
Very good. So those are the two types of LCD monitors you can have. Twisted pneumatic, gamers love it. In plane switching. In plane switching, if I remember correctly, had the wider view angle. Twisted pneumatic had a much narrower viewing angle, but had a higher refresh rate. Very good. See, we got to keep throwing it back to the early stuff so you guys remember it. All right.
It's Thursday, right? Throwback Thursday.
Throwback. Hey, there you go. All right. Digital security examples. So, talked about some of this stuff, ways we can protect it. We have talked about the firewalls before. We briefly mentioned antivirus and anti-malware software. User authentication and strong passwords. What does it mean to have a strong password? We have to have a basic understanding of this, but poor Marvin and Avery actually got to do some math with this one. I don't know if you guys have gotten to this one yet.
I believe so.
You have? Where they talked about like the exponential growth
No, not yet.
in passwords?
No, but I do know what makes a good password.
All right. Yes, because you took my course. Oh.
Yeah, yes. Yes, that is why. It is because of you, Kelly.
Absolutely. It has nothing to do with having a friend in cybersecurity. So, user authentication and passwords. Multi-factor authentication. What does that mean? VPN connections, DLP or data loss prevention solutions, disabling ports. In a software sense, you actually can disable ports physically too. And they actually have port locks. Access control lists. Where do we see access control lists? Where have we heard that word before? Not Mark.
Firewalls.
Firewalls.
Firewalls. What kind of firewall?
Nice.
Stateless.
Stateless firewall. Very good. So access control list, email filtering to get rid of those annoying spam messages, and trusted and untrusted software sources. All right. So antivirus and anti-malware, it's an application installed on a specific system to be able to protect and scan it from viruses, worms, trojans, various other forms of malware. And most viruses, as we talked about yesterday, have specific characteristics that fall into certain virus families. And the antivirus looks for these particular types of characteristics or fingerprints in order to be able to identify them and neutralize them from signatures. So you would have your definitions list within your anti-malware and anti-software that keeps it up to date as to all the new nasty stuff that is floating around out on the internet so that you can better protect yourself from them. They have two different ways they protect you. You have the definitions list, which we talked about yesterday, and that is for known viruses. Now, what do you think they do when they're trying to protect you against unknown viruses? Yeah. Any thoughts? None? Remember when we talked about symptoms of virus infections, what to look for in your system? Well, your antivirus will do something similar. It does something called heuristic algorithms. It's looking for specific behaviors happening in your systems. If something is requesting access 1,000 times a second, that's bad. And the antivirus may take action in order to stop that from happening, because that would be a symptom of potential virus infection. So, heuristic is basically just a fancy word for behavior. So it's looking for specific behaviors like the list of infection symptoms we talked about yesterday, and then taking action to kind of help. What programs are causing these behaviors? Is that something that we can shut down right now? And it may quarantine a system to better look at it so that you can try to determine whether it is infected or if it's just acting out of sorts, or if it's actually acting legitimately. All right. Firewalls. Typically the first line of defense on any enterprise network. You have both hardware and software firewalls. You have a software firewall. It is only protecting the machine it is on. Hardware firewalls are actual physical device that you would filter all network traffic through in order to try to protect your systems. Now, once you have them installed, they typically have a variety of add-on software you can apply. Like if you have a hardware one, they might have companion software that you can add to your system so that they can work together, because you don't want them working in opposition, unfortunately. Now, basic purpose of it is to isolate one network from another and make sure only legitimate traffic is passed between them. Some of the features it does: packet filtering, where it is individually looking at each packet, making sure that it is a legitimate packet. It has authorization to move through the system, and then allows it to move through. And that was where the access control list will come into play. You have a proxy firewall, which, as we talked about, a proxy is something that's doing something on behalf of someone else. So you may have all internet traffic going through a proxy firewall. So if you're trying to request access to a website, then the proxy firewall will determine whether or not you're allowed to have access to that website. And if you're allowed to have access, it will request the information from that website on your behalf and filter it back to you. And then we had the stateful inspection firewall, which is paying attention predominantly to the state of the conversation, making sure that any conversation that begins must initiate from inside the firewall. If it initiates inside the firewall, then it is determined at that point that whatever conversation takes place is consensual. Questions so far? Am I going too fast? Nope. All right. User authentication and strong passwords. Now, looking at this, I guess setting authentication security, especially in supporting users, can become high maintenance for network administrators. Now, you want your users to be able to authenticate themselves relatively easily, but you also want to be able to protect your systems and resources. So you would put into place password policies. We will get into password policies probably here in a little bit, talking about what actually qualifies as strong passwords. It's more than just, you know, use an uppercase, lowercase symbol and a number. There's a little bit more that goes into it, but we will be discussing that here in a little bit. And each little bit that you add exponentially increases the difficulty for somebody trying to crack that password. All right, let me get to multi-factor authentication, which is the 4 things we talked about: something you know, something you have, something you are, and somewhere you are. In order for it to be considered multi-factor authentication, you need to have more than one of these items. So that is why if you're trying to log into your bank account, they ask you for your sign-in and password, which is something you know. And then they'll send you a code, text you a code to your phone, which the phone is something you have. So it's something that they know will be in your possession. So you've now satisfied 2 of the qualifications, something you have and something you know. And it could be something you have where they'll send you a code to your phone, and then maybe a biometric scan of your fingerprint on the phone. So there you go, something you have and something you are. Or they may geotag you and ping your location, see where you're located. You're trying to log in to the servers at the office. Are you actually physically located at the office? Location services says, yes, you are in the building. Then yes, you are now allowed access because you're on site and you have the passcode. All right.
Yeah, don't look at chat, Kelly. It'll only throw you off your game. Just keep your game face off.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to, man, but you know, I know when we talk about security,
It gets you going. I know.
I'm trying not to get in the weeds. Questions so far with multi-factor authentication? And understand bad actors are finding ways to get around this as well. One thing, if they gain access to your sign-in and password to your bank account, they know they can't get in because they're not going to be able to have that text or that device to receive the text to be able to get in. So they may call you and pretend essentially like they are the bank and say, hey, you know, I'm with, you know, Wells Fargo or whatever. We've noticed some suspicious activity on your bank account. We want to try to figure out what's going on here. So just to be, you know, just to verify who you are, I'm going to send a code to your phone and just read out that code to me so I can verify I'm speaking to the right person. So then they put in your sign-in and password to your account. It sends that ping to the phone and you give them that access by giving them that code that's on your phone. And now they're in your bank account. So that was a real easy way they can get around the multi-factor. So that's why more and more we're starting to see potentially adding a third one to it. So they're going to go for something you know, something you have, and then possibly something you do, paying attention to how you type in your codes. All right. VPNs. Talked about these a few times throughout this course. There is a multitude of options out there, but take care and do your research in who you choose to implement. I highly recommend staying away from free VPNs if possible, just like free antivirus or anti-malware programs. They're not always legit, and they may not offer the protections they say they do. Even with the ones that do offer protection, there are different types of VPNs. There are what's called half tunnels and what are called full tunnels. With those, it means a half tunnel means only one direction of the communication is actually encrypted. And that is the encryption. I think it is from you to the tunnel, but the information coming from the tunnel back to you is not encrypted. So you have to be very careful with that. Full encryption means both directions. A full tunnel means both directions are actually encrypted themselves. Questions on that?
I liken it to online dating, I suppose, Kelly. Yeah, that's hard. Look where I'm taking you. You can't trust the angles. Sometimes they take pictures at certain angles. You can't.
Or
trust
makeup.
them. Yeah, you gotta watch. That's treat your VPN and your anti-malware like online dating. You gotta be sure that you have a trusted.
Arvin, you better not be telling these people they need to pay for it.
They have to pay for it. They shouldn't pay for it.
This is taking a really dark path.
No, we're
Wow.
going somewhere.
That is
I
messed
don't know.
up,
That's not what I
Marvin.
meant. That's not what I meant.
That's what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not.
You got to find a better analogy, bud.
I do. I'm gonna just recant my analogy since Avery messed it up and made it bad.
Okay. The other bad thing about VPNs, sometimes you have to pay attention to their data storage methods. There was one just a couple like 2 years ago that NordVPN, if anybody's ever heard of that one, they got hacked. And turns out that they kept their data for up to a month. So there was a full month's worth of data on it when they got hacked. So they basically had bank account information, all that fun stuff, for all of their users for a full month when they got breached. There are others now. NordVPN has, from what I heard, shored up their security, and they are using different data methods at this point. But most of them now wipe the servers once every 24 hours to try to prevent anything like this from happening in the future. All right, data loss prevention solutions. Mostly they are designed to be put in place to try to prevent purposeful or inadvertent escaping of data from the organization. So it allows, essentially, solutions allow you to specify exactly what solutions each user may take with respect to a particular document. Are documents allowed to be sent via email? Are they only allowed to be viewed on one particular device? Are they only allowed to be viewed within the office? Is legal only allowed to see them? Is HR only allowed to see them? So this allows you to protect the information as much as possible. Some documents may not be printed. So it can be read digitally, but you can't print it. So like it can't be emailed and it can't be printed. I don't know if many of you know this, but within any kind of document you print on laser printers and stuff like that, they actually put microscopic tags on those documents that actually will tell you who sent it to the printer. So it'll tell you what printer it was printed on and who sent it. So who actually printed that. So a lot of this was discovered when so-called leaked documents were like showing up on the news and stuff like that. And people were like getting a look at these documents, and then they were able to see who leaked the documents because of these micro tags that were printed into the documents themselves. Another interesting security measure that they put in place. That was one I
So-
just learned about a year ago. What were you saying, Avery?
So log into your coworkers' computers if you are going to be leaking data.
Exactly.
See,
Hey, can I print something from your machine?
or don't do it unless you're blowing a whistle, and we need whistleblowers for sure. This sounds like some Mission Impossible type stuff. That's why they always burn the document on Mission Impossible, because they didn't want it to be tracked back to because of microscopic information.
Microfiche.
Yeah, that's why they have to burn it. They have to blow it up, man. Y'all didn't even understand that.
This
Mission
message will
Impossible-
self-destruct in 30 seconds.
because of this. See there? We're trying to give you understanding of a lot of different things here.
That's why Inspector Gadget was always funny, because they played off of that trope. And
Yes,
every
they
time
do.
Gadget threw away, it would always land in like wherever the kernel was or whatever and blow up in his face.
A very underrated cartoon, man. That
The
little
original
girl with
one.
that dog,
The
man.
original one.
Got him out of trouble all the time.
Yeah, brain. All right. Digital security. Now moving right along. Disabling ports. This is one of the most basic principles with regards to reducing your surface area for attack on devices. It means you're shutting off any application that is not required and close all ports not being used. Remember, we said there were 65,000 ports on a computer. Think about that. That's a lot. That's a lot of ways people can access your systems. So you do what's called system hardening, and in that process, you will shut down any port that should not be available. And also, this works for physical ports too, like ports on a switch. Like if only 10 people work at that office, you can shut down, and you have a 50-person switch, you can shut down the other 40 ports on that switch. Somebody can't just walk in and plug in right into that switch, or plug into any available wall port. Remember how we talked about somebody walking in and plugging in just a wireless access point and using it like an evil twin? So they plug it in. It operates just like it's one of the regular access points for the system. And then it just sends back whatever data gets sent through it to its main host. This would prevent something like that from happening as well. So this is one way you can do it, by disabling ports. All right. Access control lists. Talked about these a little bit earlier when we talked about firewalls. It is a set of rules configured on a router or a firewall that basically control the type of traffic that is allowed to leave or enter into a network. So these lists are specifically what are used on packet filtering firewalls. You have two different types of lists you can work from: white lists and black lists. White list basically says only these programs are allowed, everything else is denied. And then you have black lists where it says everything is allowed except the stuff that's on this list. So white lists are easier to maintain, or excuse me, black lists are easier to maintain. White lists cause a lot more trouble because, there may be hundreds, if not thousands in large organizations of various programs that people need to access. Like in transportation, we had to go to places like SafeStat, DOT, various load boards, all over the place. We had to look, if a new company came to us, we had to do research on that company to see whether or not they were a legit company or might be a scam, because scams were a thing. So if we had to go to IT every single time we wanted to do research to open up any kind of sites, that would take forever. It would exponentially slow down our ability to do our jobs. So whitelists were not really an option for us. So we had to utilize blacklists, which were every time we came across a known bad site, we would add it to the list and say that it was not allowed to be accessed. So easier to manage. And then just remember, at the end of a whitelist, the last line is essentially anything that is not on this list is automatically denied. And then at the end of a blacklist, anything that is not on this list is automatically allowed. So blacklists are less secure, more functional for operations. Whitelists are more secure, less functional for operations, just because that security convenience balance. Questions?
Can also be used as decent parental control. When I was a teacher, I was able to block, or well, I would block basically any website that I didn't need my students to be on, because if you gave them that space, they would take it.
No.
Yeah, believe it or not. And so I would make use of whitelisting because they only needed to be on one specific thing. And then I would use blacklisting if it was for something like if we had recess inside or something.
Yeah.
I would, I'd give them their freedom then, but when it was time
To a
for
point.
work, yeah, to a point, exactly. But whitelisting can be really good as a parental control.
Yeah, my wife is a coach at an elementary school, but she's also the technology person at that school, like not IT, but basically the person who manages technology at the school. And so when all the laptops came back after COVID, she was just like, you would not believe some of the stuff that was on these computers. And she's like, and I know it was kids because it was all in the browser history. They didn't even think to erase the browser history.
They don't know about the browser history yet.
So yeah, this is elementary school. I could imagine like we start getting into high school and stuff like that, it could get pretty bad pretty quick.
Yep.
So, all right, moving along. Email filtering. Back in the dark days before email filtering was able to be employed, many of us remember receiving thousands of emails that were unwanted and then having to go by and delete them one by one. As well as maybe you were just part of the receiving end of a denial of service attack where you received hundreds of the same email within the span of a few minutes. Somebody trying to shut down Hotmail's servers. Avery, can you possibly take over for just a moment, please?
Sure thing. And you stopped at email filtering?
Yeah, I just started to stop the email filtering. Sorry, I got a hobbit waking up.
You're good.
Here, I'll stop it so you can share.
Thank you. All right, can you guys see my screen? Getting lots of nods. Let me get my chat up. Thank you. All right, so trusted and untrusted software sources. So while policies should definitely reflect the desire of the organization to prevent unauthorized software downloads and installation, you may have to go beyond policies and implement software restriction tool that prevents users from doing this. If you want to prevent all downloads and installations by users, you can use a group policy in Windows to require administrator privileges to do any downloading or installing. So this prevents a user from downloading something that might not necessarily be bad, but something that would be unproductive for work. It basically just provides more control for the IT people, I guess. And it also keeps you from If you're not allowed to download anything without administrative permissions, you won't be downloading anything untrusted because everything's blocked. So simple way to keep people from downloading untrusted softwares is to just block it completely. And either you download the things that they need specifically, or they have to send in a request to download it. It really just depends on the work environment, what sort of job they're doing, why they might need that. Like if it's, you know, you're working for a company and you have people that edit videos or edit music, there might be a new software that they could be using to be more productive that would be very beneficial to their job that you can look into before they go ahead and download it, just to make sure it's trustworthy. You can download it to a machine that is off the network to test it for any viruses or anything that is wrong with it. So this just makes it so that way you have more control as the security person. Any questions with that? Make sense? All right, user education and AUP, also known as acceptable use policy. So user education is the most effective method of preventing viruses, spyware, and harm to data. Like Kelly said earlier, we like to trust people. We want to be helpful. And a lot of issues with like viruses through emails or letting somebody into your building because you're trying to be helpful can be prevented through training. You know, if they know to look out for emails from outside sources, like if it's not a company email, or if they know no matter what, you do not let somebody in the building that, well, you can, if they don't work there, one, or if you don't know them, and that's implemented in schools a lot too. But user education is just extremely beneficial for everyone involved. You want to teach your users not to open suspicious files and to open only those files that they're reasonably sure are virus free. Because you know, you want them to have the freedom to think for themselves, but you know, sometimes we just need to educate a little more. They need to scan every disk, email, and document they receive before they open them. And you should also have all workstations scheduled to be automatically scanned on a regular basis. So an acceptable use policy, this is also important. In most cases, you must attempt to control what users do because users will make mistakes. And an acceptable use policy is a document that specifies what users can and cannot do, and it should be signed by all during the hiring process. It should not be a surprise to anybody if they get in trouble for doing something they're not supposed to do, especially if it's in the AUP. It's a good way to cover yourself. This creates a contract that can be used later to form the basis for disciplinary measures. So if they do something they're not supposed to, it's within the AUP and they sign it, you know, you can reprimand them for it and you have documentation, which is always important. These measures or consequences for non-compliance should be spelled out ahead of time, which would be a part of the AUP. Any questions with that? Hopefully this is all making sense.
I'm following Avery.
You're following?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Are you trying to take over or are you just telling me you're here?
No, I was letting you know, man, like you said, you know, it didn't make sense. I was saying I was following you.
Okay. Okay.
I can take over if you want me to. but
No. I didn't know if you were trying to.
You're doing such a wonderful job.
I appreciate it. All right, client responsibility and preventative security. So passwords. Change your password according to the company's password policy. Use a company established minimum character password that is unique for each account. Never write your passwords down and never share your password or your logon session with another person. I am of the opinion that no one should be using passwords. You should be using passphrases. They are significantly more secure and they can also be easier to remember. If you are having to create unique passwords all the time that are a mixture of uppercase, lowercase, numbered, special characters, it's hard to keep track of in your head, especially if you're not writing them down, which you shouldn't be doing. But if you use a passphrase, which is, you know, a phrase that's easy for you to keep in your head, I like using this example a lot. I'll do like Marvin King, and I will make Marvin like capital M @RV1 N King, and then I'll add a little phrase at the end. So I usually choose something to mess with him, but I think he stepped away for a little bit. So in the chat earlier, I said Marvin King hates football. Easy to remember. I know that Marvin likes football. It would annoy him to say that he hates it. And so it's an easy phrase for me to just remember. So if you can create a phrase that I like to relate it to whatever like account or app or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be specific related to it, but it's something that I can relate it to in my head to help me remember it. And it'll be a significant more secure password than just a regular password. On top of that, use multi-factor authentication. That's the most secure you can really get. Go ahead, Kelly.
I did have an IT guy tell me like the way that he remembered certain accounts and stuff like that. Like, you know, like if you had to have like a 10-digit code or something like that to get in somewhere, you know, like in the office building and stuff like that. We always carried notebooks around with him just to write down notes and all that stuff. In the margins of the book, you know, like of the notebook paper, he would put the codes in there in binary. So you'd have dot space in the margins of the actual page themselves. Most people would just look at it and think it was bullet points for the notes he was taking. But that was how he would put the numbers in order. And then it would just, depending on where he went, which notebook he would take, that would have the binary access codes for him. And he could read binary really quickly. And that was just how he did it for himself. I always thought that was kind of neat.
It's really neat until someone figures it out.
Yeah,
they know
he's like, the only reason I'm saying this is because I don't do it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you do have a method like that, you don't tell anybody. But that was just one I heard of that was kind of cool.
Yeah. I always like to keep this in mind. If you do not want someone to have access to your account, they should not know your password or how you came up with the password. So use passphrases, use multi-factor authentication, and you will be pretty secure. For logins, never walk away from a logged on workstation and lock down your PC. A shortcut on Windows is your Windows key plus L or Control-Alt-Delete and click lock this PC. You should also be making use of a password protected screensaver and don't use auto logon features. And then also be aware of who's around you when you log in. You don't want other people finding out your password by looking over you. So just make sure that people aren't looking at you. But using the password protected screensaver is pretty frequently a test question on a way to secure the workstation. You should always be using that, because that if you do walk away, it will trigger over a certain period of time, and that will help in case somebody forgets. Some other information: allow all approved updates and patches to be installed on your PC. So you want to make sure your computer's up to date, so that way it'll be as secure as it can be. You want to back up any personal data onto verified removable media, and never leave a company notebook or phone where it can be stolen or compromised. Easier said than done, but you can only secure your phone to a certain extent. If it does get stolen, there are remote wipe options, there are tracking options. So you just got to make sure those are enabled. Kelly, did you want to add something?
Yeah, public service announcement, because I've seen this more than one time with work phones. Don't write the access code for the phone on a sticky note and put it on the phone inside the case.
Yeah.
Please don't do this.
Yes.
Because that is a really common place people put it. That's one of the first place they look for something like that.
Do not write down your passwords. Especially, so, you use different passwords and passphrases for different accounts.
Mhm.
But if it's a personal thing, like if it's a password to log on to, I don't know, some website that you might play games on, and that's a password that or an account that you don't care if people get into. You don't keep personal information in it. The password, you don't use it for your bank account or anything that you really want to be secured. For those types of apps, websites, whatever, sometimes I'll use the same password for those, because it doesn't really matter if somebody gets it, because I don't keep any personal data on it. And I'd never save my banking information, billing information into those sort of websites. So, if somebody wants to buy a game on there, go ahead, but you won't be able to buy it using my cards. But that's getting a little off topic. Let's move
Not
on.
really.
It's sort of off topic. It's not the principle of least privilege, which we'll
that
go
is
over
true.
right now.
I will give
When
you that.
assigning permissions, give users only the permissions they need to do their work and no more. This is especially true with administrators. If you are an administrator, you should not always be logged in as an administrator, because you're logged in and somebody somehow gains access to it. They can do whatever they need to do because they have those administrative privileges automatically. But also it prevents you from accidentally changing something that you didn't mean to change. So if you're an administrator and you're trying to change some permissions and it pops up, you need administrative permissions to do this change into your admin password and stuff. You can stop and think, do I need to do this? Is this the best way to move forward? If it is, you can move forward. If not, it stops you from making unnecessary changes. So users who need administrative level permissions should be assigned 2 accounts, which I just said, one for performing non-administrative day-to-day tasks, and one to be used only when performing those administrative tasks that specifically require an administrative level user account. Users with administrative level permissions should be educated on how each of these accounts should be used. So just make sure you inform your people of when it's appropriate to use their admin privileges, when it's not. But hopefully if somebody has those permissions, they're already aware of what they should and shouldn't be doing. Any questions with that? Not move on to our objectives revisited. So we should be able to identify a variety of security prevention methods, should be able to compare and contrast common prevention methods to aid in physical and digital security, should be able to explain several ways that clients can prevent security threats on their own, explain the principle of least privilege, and next is the lab and a little quiz. And I'll stop sharing, let you guys work on that, and I will repost the Nearpod link. And give you guys about, what, 5 minutes, Kelly, to do it? It's probably good.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I'll pause the
There's
recording.